you're talking about the palettes, there's a couple things to consider about the palettes. The first is, how do you plan on painting most of the time? Do you want to be outside, painting in plein air, or do you want to be inside your studio and you're planning on painting there a lot? So, and depending on that, there's also kind of the price points. If you're planning on painting outside, I would strongly recommend the Sienna plein air box, and there's a couple reasons for that. Number one, it is very light, it's travelable, you can throw it in like your computer bag backpack and get ready to hike and out into the open and find someplace beautiful to paint. You can also use it indoors. It takes so little space that you can easily pack it up or pull it out and paint in the living room, dining room, wherever it works for you. So that's if you're planning on painting a lot outside or have like a compact space, the Sienna plein air is perfect. And I'll include a link in this. If you're planning on painting indoors a lot, there's a couple of options that I'd recommend. And the first is called a Masterson's palette. And I actually have two of these. I've had them ever since the beginning. And the reason is I recommend these is because you put a lid on it, and when you're done with your paints, you can just stick them in the freezer or the refrigerator and they'll keep for at least a week. And therefore you can really, extend the use and the life of your paints. In my two palettes, my two Masterson's palettes, I actually have in one palette a glass bottom, and I had that cut at our local hardware store. I've had that since the very beginning, like 17, 18 years, and I had a problem with it. I like the glass palette so I can just scrape off that extra or dried paint and create like a new surface. That's just fabulous. And I don't feel like I'm wasting as much because the materials are already bought. I'm using the glass and I'm using a scraper. The most I have to do is purchase new blades every so often. The other palette, I have what's called palette paper inside of it. And I use palette paper in the second palette because the second palette is not one that I use very often. It is primarily used for like special projects where it's using paint colors that I don't often use in my everyday painting. The less expensive option that I've actually built for my classes that I teach in person is these little 8x10, just simple 8x10 frames with glass that I got at Hobby Lobby. In the download where I talk about colors in the palette, there's actually an 8x10 download of the colors that I have in there, so you can see that here as well. This is a great option. When I'm done painting for the day with my students, I'll actually scrape up the extra paint, put it into these little circle containers that are in the jewelry section of Hobby Lobby, and I'll stick that into the freezer. That way I'm not wasting all that paint too. As far as what I would recommend in general for you, invest in the Masterson with the glass palette and a palette scraper. If you're planning to paint indoors. If you're planning to paint outdoors a lot, I would really recommend that Sienna. It's a little bit more, it's not a little bit, it's a lot more expensive, but it also includes your easel and everything that you would need for the plein air painting experience.